My name is Myra Pullman. I was 33 years old the night my father handed me a letter designed to dismantle me. It was my sister Leah's wedding. 300 guests, a lakeside estate draped in fairy lights that shimmered across the water like scattered coins. The band was playing something slow and golden. And Leah stood 12 feet away in imported lace, champagne in one hand, watching me, waiting. My father crossed the reception floor carrying a cream-colored envelope sealed with wax, his initials pressed into it. He placed it in my hands in front of 6 people at my table and said I should read it when I was ready. I read it right there. 2 pages typed. Legal language woven through personal grievance. The final line informed me I was no longer a Pullman in any meaningful sense. Leah's smile widened. She anticipated tears. She expected me to rise from my chair, knock it backward, and hand 300 guests something to whisper about on the drive home. But here is what none of them knew. 3 weeks before my father pressed that wax seal, I had already signed something that would quietly reshape everything they believed they owned. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we share stories of ordinary people who chose dignity over destruction and boundaries over bitterness. If you have ever felt invisible inside your own family, this one is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. My mother's name was Carol Pullman. She died of pancreatic cancer when I was 14. That is the brief version. The fuller version is that she spent 9 months diminishing in a hospital bed while my father redecorated his office and confirmed client dinners. She asked me to bring her sketch pad. She asked my father to bring the company's quarterly filings. He brought flowers instead. She stopped asking. Carol Pullman co-founded Pullman Development Corporation in 1998 with 40% ownership and a drafting table she purchased at a garage sale. She designed the first 3 commercial builds that placed the company on the map. My father sold them. That was the arrangement. She built. He talked. 2 weeks after her funeral, I found him clearing out her closet. Suits into trash bags, jewelry, and a shoebox set aside for donation. I stood in the doorway and watched him fold her life into black plastic. But he missed something. In the far corner of her top shelf, concealed behind a stack of old blueprints, sat a small cedar box. Dark wood, brass hinges. It carried the scent of her closet, cedar, aged paper, and the faint trace of lavender sachets she kept in her drawers. Inside was a handwritten letter addressed to me. Myra, everything I built so you would never have to beg. Remember that when they tell you what you deserve. I was 14. I did not grasp what she meant. I assumed mothers simply spoke that way, sweeping sentences that carried the weight of meaning without delivering its specifics. I kept the box. I kept the letter. I did not examine the back of it for 19 years. That was my first mistake. Or perhaps it was my mother's only secret. 11 months after my mother died, my father brought Diane Morris home for dinner. She was the company's bookkeeper. She had known my mother. She had attended the funeral, 2nd row, black dress, dry eyes. I remembered her because she was the only person who did not cry. Diane moved in by spring. By summer, she had reorganized the house. My mother's reading chair was relocated to the garage. Her framed prints came down from the walls. The bedroom they had shared became Diane's yoga studio within 6 months. I found my parents' wedding photograph in the recycling bin on a Tuesday morning. It was wedged between a cereal box and a stack of junk mail. I pulled it out, wiped the coffee stain from the glass, and carried it to my room without a word. Diane noticed. She knocked on my door that evening, sat on the edge of my bed, and placed a hand on my shoulder. Warm, deliberate, the kind of gesture that reads as kindness from a distance. Your mother would have wanted your father to be happy, she said. Do not make this about you. I was 15. I did not yet possess the vocabulary for what I felt. I only knew that something in her voice did not align with something in her eyes. She was performing comfort the way you perform a song you have rehearsed but never truly felt. Diane's reorganization continued. By the following year, my mother's name had been removed from the company's lobby wall. Her drafting table was donated to a community college. Her design awards were boxed and stored in the attic. Diane called it making space for the future. I called it erasure, but I was 15 and no one asked what I called it. Leah was born when I was 16. Diane delivered her in May. By June, the nursery was finished in custom wallpaper that cost more than my entire year of school supplies. By September, my father was describing their new beginning-to-dinner guests, as though the first 30 years of his life had been a rough draft. Leah grew up inside a different family than the one I had known. Private school, dance lessons, a car at 16, a white Audi with a bow on the hood, summer internships arranged through my father's contacts, college tuition settled without a single conversation about cost. I watched from the margins. Waitressing after school, borrowing textbooks, eating ramen in my bedroom while the family had roast chicken downstairs, not because the door was locked, but because Diane set 3 places at the table. She said I preferred eating alone. Leah was not cruel. That matters. She was 10 years old the first time she asked Diane why I always looked distant at family gatherings. Diane smoothed Leah's hair and said, "Because she chose to leave us, sweetheart." Leah believed it. Why would she not? She was a child raised on a version of history, authored by the people who profited from it. But there was one moment I have turned over 100 times since. Leah was 12. I was visiting for Thanksgiving, the last time I would for years. She found me washing dishes alone in the kitchen while everyone else watched football. "Myra," she said, "how come you are never in the family photos?" I opened my mouth, closed it, and smiled. "I guess I am always the one holding the camera," I said. She nodded and walked away. She was 12. She did not know the camera was a lie. I left the day after my 18th birthday. One suitcase, a scholarship letter from the State University's engineering program, and a cedar box tucked between 2 sweaters. My father stood in the kitchen doorway with his coffee and said, "If you walk out that door, do not expect anything from this family." I walked out the door. 15 years. That is how long it took to construct a life from one suitcase. I studied structural engineering because I was drawn to the mathematics of load-bearing walls, how much pressure a thing could absorb before it fractured. I worked construction summers. I read blueprints the way other women read novels, every line a wall I could raise with my own hands. By 25, I was a project manager at a commercial construction firm in Charlotte. By 28, I was overseeing hospital expansions and mixed-use developments valued in the tens of millions. I earned every title, every client, every late night spent reviewing steel specifications at my kitchen table. I never called home asking for money. Never requested a reference. Never asked for anything. My name is Myra Pullman. I was 33 years old the night my father handed me a letter designed to dismantle me. It was my sister Leah's wedding. 300 guests, a lakeside estate draped in fairy lights that shimmered across the water like scattered coins. The band was playing something slow and golden. And Leah stood 12 feet away in imported lace, champagne in one hand, watching me, waiting. My father crossed the reception floor carrying a cream-colored envelope sealed with wax, his initials pressed into it. He placed it in my hands in front of 6 people at my table and said I should read it when I was ready. I read it right there. 2 pages typed. Legal language woven through personal grievance. The final line informed me I was no longer a Pullman in any meaningful sense. Leah's smile widened. She anticipated tears. She expected me to rise from my chair, knock it backward, and hand 300 guests something to whisper about on the drive home. But here is what none of them knew. 3 weeks before my father pressed that wax seal, I had already signed something that would quietly reshape everything they believed they owned. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we share stories of ordinary people who chose dignity over destruction and boundaries over bitterness. If you have ever felt invisible inside your own family, this one is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. My mother's name was Carol Pullman. She died of pancreatic cancer when I was 14. That is the brief version. The fuller version is that she spent 9 months diminishing in a hospital bed while my father redecorated his office and confirmed client dinners. She asked me to bring her sketch pad. She asked my father to bring the company's quarterly filings. He brought flowers instead. She stopped asking. Carol Pullman co-founded Pullman Development Corporation in 1998 with 40% ownership and a drafting table she purchased at a garage sale. She designed the first 3 commercial builds that placed the company on the map. My father sold them. That was the arrangement. She built. He talked. 2 weeks after her funeral, I found him clearing out her closet. Suits into trash bags, jewelry, and a shoebox set aside for donation. I stood in the doorway and watched him fold her life into black plastic. But he missed something. In the far corner of her top shelf, concealed behind a stack of old blueprints, sat a small cedar box. Dark wood, brass hinges. It carried the scent of her closet, cedar, aged paper, and the faint trace of lavender sachets she kept in her drawers. Inside was a handwritten letter addressed to me. Myra, everything I built so you would never have to beg. Remember that when they tell you what you deserve. I was 14. I did not grasp what she meant. I assumed mothers simply spoke that way, sweeping sentences that carried the weight of meaning without delivering its specifics. I kept the box. I kept the letter. I did not examine the back of it for 19 years. That was my first mistake. Or perhaps it was my mother's only secret. 11 months after my mother died, my father brought Diane Morris home for dinner. She was the company's bookkeeper. She had known my mother. She had attended the funeral, second row, black dress, dry eyes. I remembered her because she was the only person who did not cry. Diane moved in by spring. By summer, she had reorganized the house. My mother's reading chair was relocated to the garage. Her framed prints came down from the walls. The bedroom they had shared became Diane's yoga studio within 6 months. I found my parents' wedding photograph in the recycling bin on a Tuesday morning. It was wedged between a cereal box and a stack of junk mail. I pulled it out, wiped the coffee stain from the glass, and carried it to my room without a word. Diane noticed. She knocked on my door that evening, sat on the edge of my bed, and placed a hand on my shoulder. Warm, deliberate, the kind of gesture that reads as kindness from a distance. Your mother would have wanted your father to be happy, she said. Do not make this about you. I was 15. I did not yet possess the vocabulary for what I felt. I only knew that something in her voice did not align with something in her eyes. She was performing comfort the way you perform a song you have rehearsed but never truly felt. Diane's reorganization continued. By the following year, my mother's name had been removed from the company's lobby wall. Her drafting table was donated to a community college. Her design awards were boxed and stored in the attic. Diane called it making space for the future. I called it erasure, but I was 15 and no one asked what I called it. Leah was born when I was 16. Diane delivered her in May. By June, the nursery was finished in custom wallpaper that cost more than my entire year of school supplies. By September, my father was describing their new beginning to dinner guests, as though the first 30 years of his life had been a rough draft. Leah grew up inside a different family than the one I had known. Private school, dance lessons, a car at 16, a white Audi with a bow on the hood, summer internships arranged through my father's contacts, college tuition settled without a single conversation about cost. I watched from the margins. Waitressing after school, borrowing textbooks, eating ramen in my bedroom while the family had roast chicken downstairs, not because the door was locked, but because Diane set 3 places at the table. She said I preferred eating alone. Leah was not cruel. That matters. She was 10 years old the first time she asked Diane why I always looked distant at family gatherings. Diane smoothed Leah's hair and said, "Because she chose to leave us, sweetheart." Leah believed it. Why would she not? She was a child raised on a version of history, authored by the people who profited from it. But there was one moment I have turned over 100 times since. Leah was 12. I was visiting for Thanksgiving, the last time I would for years. She found me washing dishes alone in the kitchen while everyone else watched football. "Myra," she said, "how come you are never in the family photos?" I opened my mouth, closed it, and smiled. "I guess I am always the one holding the camera," I said. She nodded and walked away. She was 12. She did not know the camera was a lie. I left the day after my 18th birthday. One suitcase, a scholarship letter from the State University's engineering program, and a cedar box tucked between 2 sweaters. My father stood in the kitchen doorway with his coffee and said, "If you walk out that door, do not expect anything from this family." I walked out the door. 15 years. That is how long it took to construct a life from one suitcase. I studied structural engineering because I was drawn to the mathematics of load-bearing walls, how much pressure a thing could absorb before it fractured. I worked construction summers. I read blueprints the way other women read novels, every line a wall I could raise with my own hands. By 25, I was a project manager at a commercial construction firm in Charlotte. By 28, I was overseeing hospital expansions and mixed-use developments valued in the tens of millions. I earned every title, every client, every late night spent reviewing steel specifications at my kitchen table. I never called home asking for money, never requested a reference, never asked for anything. These lines were opened when you were a minor. Your father had access to your social security number as your legal guardian. He exploited it. That is a felony in most states. I studied the papers. 19 years of silent theft documented in ink and filing numbers. How long until he finds out? I asked. The Attorney General sends a preliminary inquiry letter within 60 days of the complaint. We filed in early April. The wedding is late May. She paused. He will know after the wedding. I nodded. That was sufficient. Diane's manipulation was never allowed. That was precisely what made it so effective. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She restructured reality one careful detail at a time. The way you remove stitches from a hem, slowly, deliberately, until the entire garment unravels and no one remembers it was ever whole. Holiday dinners where my chair had vanished. Oh, I assumed you were not coming. Family portraits taken on the front porch without me. You were in the restroom, sweetheart. We could not wait. The light was fading. Christmas cards signed Richard, Diane, and Leah, sent to 200 contacts every December. My name erased from the family's public presence for an entire decade. She informed the women at church that I had withdrawn on my own. Our eldest chose to leave. We pray for her every Sunday. She delivered it with the mournful smile of a woman weighed down by someone else's decisions, not her own. She told Leah that my mother had been difficult and that my father had sacrificed enormously. She told Richard that I was volatile and unstable, and just like Carol. She planted these things over dinner, in the car, during commercial breaks, a drip campaign of quiet distortion that ran for 19 years. And the Disownment letter was Diane's masterpiece. I learned this later through Nathan. It was Diane who proposed it. Diane who composed the language. Diane who selected the timing, the wedding reception, 300 guests, maximum audience. A formal letter will give the family closure, she had told Richard. She will not cause a scene at Leah's wedding. She is too proud. She was right about one thing. I was too proud. But she was mistaken about what proud people do when they are cornered. They do not weep. They do not flee. They count the exits. She will always be Carol's daughter, not ours. That was what Diane said to Richard the evening before the wedding. Nathan overheard it through the hotel room wall. My father was never the architect. My mother was. I did not grasp this as a child. I grew up watching him exchange handshakes at company events, deliver speeches at ribbon cuttings, stand before buildings bearing his name. He resembled the man who had raised them. He had the suits, the handshake, the commanding voice. But the designs belonged to Carol. The first 3 commercial projects that established Pullman development on the map, a medical office park, a mixed-use building on the waterfront, a boutique hotel that earned a regional design award, all of them originated from my mother's drafting table. Her sketches, her structural calculations, her late nights with graph paper and a mechanical pencil. My father sold them. He was exceptional at selling. Clients admired him. Bankers trusted him. But without Carol's designs, he was simply a man with a polished handshake and an empty lot. I remember a dinner party when I was 12. A client's wife leaned across the table and said to me, "Your mom is the true mind behind this operation, you know." She intended it as a compliment. My father's expression darkened. Not with anger, something worse. Exposure. Like someone had drawn back a curtain, and the audience could suddenly see the machinery operating behind the stage. 3 months after my mother's death, he retained a public relations firm. They rebranded the company, stripped Carol's name from the website, the letterhead, the awards page. To the outside world, the company had always been Pullman Development Corporation, but internally, on the original incorporation documents, it had been Carol Pullman Design Associates. He erased that too. He was not merely concealing a trust. He was concealing the fact that everything he possessed had been constructed by a woman whose name he spent 19 years methodically burying. And I was the living testament to that truth. I had her jawline, her handwriting, her habit of remaining silent until the calculation was complete. No wonder he needed me gone. Leah invited me dress shopping in April. It was the first family invitation I had received in 8 years that arrived without conditions attached. I went, not because I wished to watch my half-sister try on gowns financed by money that should have been mine, but because Grace had advised me to keep the surface undisturbed. Maintain appearances until the filing's clear. Give them no reason to suspect anything. The bridal salon occupied a converted warehouse in Southend. Soaring ceilings, natural light, champagne upon arrival. Diane was already there, reclined in a velvet armchair with her legs crossed, surveying the room as though she owned it. Leah tried on 7 gowns. She looked breathtaking in every one. I will not pretend otherwise. She had Diane's cheekbones and my father's effortless confidence. And when she emerged in a hand-beaded gown with a cathedral train, even the saleswoman fell momentarily silent. The dress was $14,000. Diane produced a credit card. The saleswoman ran it. The receipt printed. Leah embraced her mother. Diane smoothed the receipt flat against the counter and moved toward the door. I glanced at the receipt. A Visa. Last 4 digits, 7741. I recognized the number. It was connected to the second home equity line, the one opened in my name when I was 17. $118,000 of debt I had never authorized. And they were using it to purchase a wedding gown. I reached into my pocket, raised my phone, and photographed the receipt. The saleswoman glanced over. I smiled. Just preserving a memory, I said. $14,000 charged to a card bearing my social security number, for a dress I would never wear, at a wedding I was never meant to endure. I forwarded the photo to Grace that night. Her reply was immediate. Noted. The rehearsal dinner was held the evening before the wedding at a restaurant the venue had recommended. A private room, white tablecloths, a jazz trio stationed in the corner, 40 guests, family, the wedding party, Nathan's parents. I was placed at the far end of the table between a groomsman I had never encountered and Nathan's great-aunt, who was hard of hearing and directed most of her conversation toward her bread roll. My father rose for a toast. He lifted a glass of bourbon and spoke about family, about loyalty, about the kind of bonds that no distance or disagreement can dissolve. He looked directly at me. Some people earn their place in a family, he said. Others walk away and expect it to be waiting for them. The room murmured. Several faces turned in my direction. Diane pressed Richard's hand and lowered her gaze with a practiced, martyred composure. Nathan shifted in his seat. He caught my eye across the table. His jaw was drawn tight. I sipped my water, smiled at the groomsman, and asked him about his drive up from Atlanta. The moment dissolved. After dinner, I walked toward the restroom. The hallway was narrow, exposed brick, dim lighting. I heard voices around the corner before I reached them. Diane and Leah, speaking in hushed tones. Tomorrow your father will handle it, Diane said. She will not make a scene. Are you certain? Leah's voice was smaller than I had anticipated. What if she is too proud to weep in public? Trust me. She will read it. She will leave. And that will be the end of it. I stood motionless and counted to 5. Then I turned the corner and walked past both of them without acknowledging either. Diane straightened her posture. Leah studied her shoes. I washed my hands, dried them, returned to the table, and finished my water. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my hotel room. The lakeside estate had a modest inn connected to the property. My room overlooked the water. I could hear the catering trucks arriving for the following day, the hum of a generator being tested, someone laughing out on the dock. I opened the cedar box. I had carried it from my mother's closet through every apartment, every city, every fresh beginning for 19 years. The brass hinges had tarnished. The wood had deepened in color, but when I lifted the lid, the scent was unchanged. Cedar and lavender and aged paper. My mother's closet compressed into 6 inches of wood. I read the letter again. I had read it so many times the creases had gone soft. The ink had faded in places where my thumb habitually rested. Myra, everything I built so you would never have to beg. Remember that when they tell you what you deserve. Then I turned the paper over. I had never examined the back. Not at 14 when I first discovered it. Not at 18 when I folded it into my suitcase. Not at 25 or 30 or 32. I had read the front 100 times and returned it to the box every single time without ever flipping it. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, smaller, more deliberate, as though written separately and with great care, were 3 things: a name, a phone number, and a brief instruction. Margaret Shelby. The phone number carried a different area code than ours. And beneath it, the words, "Ask for the trust." My mother had known. She had known my father would suppress it. She had known Diane would assist him. So she had written herself a contingency plan in her own hand and concealed it inside a cedar box on a shelf her daughter would one day find. I pressed the letter against my chest. The paper had warmed from my hands. 19 years too late, but I was here. Grace called at 7:45 the morning of the wedding. I was already dressed. Navy suit, low heels, the cedar box tucked inside my handbag. I had not slept much. I had spent most of the night researching Margaret Shelby, the attorney my mother had inscribed on the back of the letter. She had retired in 2019, but her firm remained active. Grace had already contacted them in February. That was how she had located the trust filing so swiftly. "Good news," Grace said. "Surrogate court accepted the trust activation affidavit. As of 9 o'clock yesterday morning, you are legally recognized as the sole beneficiary of Carol Pullman's testamentary trust." I lowered myself onto the edge of the hotel bed. 40% of Pullman Development Corporation is yours, Myra. It has been yours since your 30th birthday. Your father simply never told you. And the Attorney General's preliminary investigation has been opened. They have the identity theft complaint, the forged executor documents, the credit line records. Your father will receive an inquiry letter by early next week. I gazed out the window. The lake was flat and silver. Chairs were being arranged across the lawn in rows of 20. "Whatever unfolds today," Grace said, "you have already prevailed on paper." "It was never about paper," I said. Grace went quiet for a moment. "Then one more thing." I traced the forged executive affidavit, the one that suppressed the trust. The notary's stamp belongs to Diane Morris Pullman. She was the one who filed it. I closed my eyes. "Richard signed it," Grace said. "But Diane created it. She was the bookkeeper. She knew precisely where every document was kept. Diane, who had told me not to make this about myself. Who had erased my mother's name from the lobby wall. Who had conceived the disownment letter." I thanked Grace, ended the call, and placed the phone in my bag beside the cedar box. Time to attend a wedding. If you have ever discovered that someone you trusted had been stealing from you in ways you never imagined, you understand this sensation. That cold, crystalline clarity of knowing. If you are still with me, leave a comment and subscribe, because what unfolded at that wedding was only the beginning. The ceremony was beautiful. I will say that directly because it is the truth. The estate perched on a ridge above the lake. White chairs spread across a manicured lawn. An archway of peonies and eucalyptus. A string quartet performing pichelbel, then something contemporary I did not recognize. 300 guests in linen and silk, fanning themselves beneath the late May heat. I was seated in the rear row, not by preference. Diane had arranged the seating. Family filled the first 4 rows on the left. I was in row 14, right side, between a colleague of Nathan's and an elderly cousin of Diane's who carried the scent of lavender. I did not mind. Leah walked the aisle on my father's arm. She was luminous. The beaded gown captured the sunlight and scattered it in small white bursts across the lawn. Her veil was cathedral length, trailing behind her like a second presence. She was 29 and radiant and had spent her entire life preparing for this single moment. Nathan's eyes glistened when he saw her. His hands trembled when he took hers. That part was genuine. Whatever else I might say about the people surrounding this wedding, Nathan loved Leah completely. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened as he struggled to hold himself together. The vows were traditional and brief. A minister from the church Diane attended. "Do you take this woman?" "I do." "Do you take this man?" "I do." Rings. A kiss. Applause. I clapped alongside everyone else. I felt the cedar box press against my hip through my handbag. I thought about my mother walking down an aisle 20 years before this one, holding the arm of a man who would spend the following decade systematically erasing her. The string quartet played the recessional. Sunlight struck the lake. 300 people rose and smiled. I rose and smiled as well. The reception was held beneath a tent the size of a modest aircraft hangar, open sides facing the water. A hardwood dance floor laid over the grass. A 12-piece band that had traveled up from Nashville. Table centerpieces that likely cost more than my first month's rent in Charlotte. I was placed at table 19, the farthest table from the head table, the table reserved for guests you are obligated to invite but prefer not to encounter. I shared it with a retired accountant from Nathan's firm, two of Leah's sorority friends who had spent the entire cocktail hour on their phones, and a couple from Diane's neighborhood who kept asking whether I was the other daughter. I ate the salmon, drank the sparkling water, engaged in pleasant conversation about Charlotte real estate and the unseasonable warmth. I was halfway through dessert when I saw him. My father rose from the head table. He exchanged a few words with Diane. She nodded. He straightened his jacket, reached beneath the table, and lifted an envelope, cream-colored, formal. I could make out the wax seal from 40 feet away. He crossed the dance floor. The band was performing a Cole Porter standard. Couples were still moving across the hardwood. He navigated between the tables with the measured composure of a man who has rehearsed a moment and intends to honor every beat of it. He arrived at table 19. He positioned himself beside my chair. The retired accountant glanced up. The sorority friend paused her scrolling. "Myra," he said. His voice was level, rehearsed. "I want to give you something. I have been considering this for a long time." He extended the envelope toward me, held carefully in both hands. Not a gift, a verdict. Diane observed from across the room, hands folded, chin lifted. The band played on. I accepted the envelope. The wax seal bore his initials, RP. The paper was substantial, expensive, the kind purchased for documents intended to feel consequential. I broke the seal, unfolded 2 pages, and read them in front of 6 people who had stopped eating. The letter was typed, single-spaced, 2 pages. The first was legal language, formal severance of familial obligations, dissolution of financial, emotional, and social bonds, effective immediately and irrevocably. It read like a contract assembled by someone who had searched legal templates online and inserted personal grievances between the clauses. The second page was personal. My father's voice, typed, but unmistakable. "You abandoned this family 18 years ago. You rejected every opportunity we extended. You chose to remain a stranger." A paragraph about how Diane and Leah had constructed something beautiful in my absence. A paragraph about how I had refused to participate in reconciliation. A paragraph about my mother that declared she would have understood. The final line was centered and bolded. "You are no longer a Pullman in any meaningful way." I read it twice, not because I needed to comprehend it, but because I wanted to commit every word to memory. The retired accountant set down his fork. One of the sorority friends murmured something to the other. The couple from Diane's neighborhood fixed their gaze on their plates. I looked up. My father stood 3 feet away, jaw set, hands at his sides, waiting. Across the dance floor, Leah held her champagne, watching. Her smile was small and anticipatory, the smile of someone who has been told how a story concludes and is simply watching it arrive. I folded the letter once, then twice, and slid it into my jacket pocket alongside the cedar box. "Thank you, Dad," I said. "I will keep this." He blinked. That is the detail I recall most vividly. Not the letter, not the expressions around the table, not Leah's champagne or Diane's composed hands. My father blinked. And in that single blink, I watched the entire script he had written for this moment collapse. I was supposed to weep. I was supposed to lurch upright so abruptly my chair scraped across the floor. I was supposed to press my napkin to my eyes and move quickly toward the exit while 300 guests observed and whispered and confirmed everything Diane had ever said about me. That was the design. I could feel it suspended in the air like a note that never resolved. Instead, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a smirk, not a grin of triumph. Simply a calm, unhurried smile. The kind offered to someone when you possess knowledge they do not, and you are choosing, for now, to withhold it. "Thank you, Dad," I said once more. I will keep this. I eased back my chair. I stood. I crossed to the dance floor and found Nathan's uncle, a 72-year-old retired pharmacist who had been sitting alone since the second course. I asked whether he would like to dance. He would. The band was playing something slow. We moved in a modest circle near the edge of the floor. He told me about his garden, about his wife who had passed, about a hydrangea bush that bloomed blue every June regardless of what he did to the soil. Behind me, I could sense my father still standing at table 19, still there, still holding nothing. He had anticipated tears. I offered him a fold, a pocket, and a waltz. I danced 3 songs. I meant every step. Diane reached my father in under a minute. I observed her crossing the dance floor from the corner of my eye, heels sharp against the hardwood, clutch pressed to her hip. She seized Richard's elbow and steered him toward the far edge of the tent. What happened? Her voice carried. She was not whispering the way she ordinarily did. Did she read it? She smiled. My father said, "She what?" She read it. She folded it. She placed it in her pocket and said, "Thank you." I could not hear the remainder because the band shifted into an upbeat number and Nathan's uncle spun me badly, but with tremendous enthusiasm. When I looked again, Diane and Richard were huddled near the bar with Leah positioned between them, 3 heads drawn close, 3 mouths moving rapidly. 10 minutes elapsed. I danced with Nathan's uncle, then with the retired accountant from my table, who proved to be a surprisingly capable lead. I complimented the caterer on the salmon. I inquired about the florals with a bridesmaid. I was warm, engaged, present, and entirely composed. The contrast was legible to anyone paying attention. The bride's family clustered in a knot of visible tension near the bar. The bride's estranged half-sister laughing freely on the dance floor. Leah broke away from the group. She moved toward me with her champagne and her cathedral veil trailing across the grass. "Myra." Her voice was flat, measured. The voice of someone who has been carefully coached. "Congratulations, Leah. The ceremony was breathtaking. Why are you still here?" I regarded her. 29 years old, 4 hours married, standing in a $14,000 gown purchased on a credit card bearing my name. "Because the band is exceptional," I said, "and the salmon was outstanding." I danced 3 more songs. They spent all 3 watching. Nathan found me between songs. He carried 2 glasses of water and offered one without a word, then stood beside me at the railing overlooking the lake. The band was on a break. The sun had descended and the fairy lights had assumed command, hundreds of them strung between the tent poles, casting long golden threads across the water. "Are you all right?" he said. Quiet, direct, the voice of a man who had witnessed something he could not fully interpret but recognized instinctively as wrong. "I am fine, Nathan. Congratulations, by the way. You looked as though you meant every word up there." He half smiled. I did. He paused, turning the water glass in his hands. "For what it is worth," he said, "Leah does not know half of it. About your family, about the finances. She believes everything belongs to her father, his achievement, his reputation, his buildings." "I know. I have reviewed the invoices, Myra. The subcontractor disputes, the manner in which Diane manages the accounts. Something is deeply wrong. I have sensed it since the engagement party. I studied him. He was 31, an engineer like me. Structural, not commercial. He understood load-bearing walls. He understood what occurs when the foundation is fundamentally unsound." "Why did you not say anything?" I asked. "Because I love her, and because I believed it was not my story to tell." He looked toward the lake. "I am sorry about the letter. About all of it." "Do not be sorry," I said. "Just be good to her." He nodded. We stood there briefly, watching the fairy lights ripple across the water. Then he returned inside to find his wife. I remained at the railing. The water moved softly against the dock below. Somewhere in the distance, a bullfrog called twice and fell silent. Nathan was a decent man. That was something. Leah would need that. I discovered a bench at the far end of the dock. The reception was winding down behind me. Laughter, music, the delicate percussion of glasses. Out here it was dark and cool, and the lake extended flat in every direction. The stars were visible, the kind of sky only found beyond the city, where artificial light has not yet learned to compete. I opened my handbag and retrieved the cedar box. The brass hinges clicked softly. The scent rose to meet me. Cedar and lavender and aged paper. 19 years of carrying this box, and it still breathed like her closet. I held the letter in both hands, read the front one final time, then turned it over and read the back again. Margaret Shelby. The phone number. Ask for the trust. Mom, I said aloud. To the lake and the stars and no one in particular. They erased you from everything. The company, the house, the photographs, the lobby wall. They dismantled the name you constructed and surrendered it to a man who never sketched a single line. The water pressed against the dock in small, unhurried surges, but they could not erase you from the paperwork. They could not erase you from a filing in a county clerk's office in a town they never thought to examine. I felt a tear trace down my cheek. 1. Not for the letter my father had delivered. Not for the $14,000 gown or the table at the rear of the room. For the 19 years my mother's name lay buried. For the woman who had seen it approaching and composed a contingency plan in her own handwriting and concealed it inside a cedar box for her daughter to one day uncover. I wiped the tear, returned the letter to the box, and closed the lid. The hinges clicked. Then I rose, straightened my jacket, and walked back toward the reception. There was nothing remaining to mourn here, only something to complete. Diane intercepted me in the hallway on my way back from the dock. The corridor connecting the tent to the inn was narrow, exposed stone walls, low ceiling, a solitary sconce casting amber light. She was positioned in the center of it, arms folded, obstructing the passage the way she had blocked doorways throughout my childhood, not with locks, but with sheer presence. "You think smiling makes you strong," she said. Her voice was clipped and controlled, but beneath it something was vibrating. Fear, perhaps, or the fury of someone whose carefully written script had unraveled. "I think the flowers are beautiful, Diane. Do not patronize me. You read that letter. You understand what it signifies. You are not part of this family. You never were. I am fully aware of what my father wrote." She stepped closer. "Your mother would be ashamed of. Do not." I said it the way you close a door. No force. Just the quiet, definitive engagement of a latch. Diane stopped. She had been mid-sentence, mid-breath, mid-performance. No one had interrupted her in 19 years. She blinked, recalibrated, and shifted her approach. "This family gave you everything," she said. Her voice fractured, not with sorrow, but with the strain of sustaining a character she had been constructing for 2 decades. "And you gave us nothing." I looked at her. The woman who had discarded my mother's wedding photograph. Who had signed a forged executive affidavit. Who had open lines of credit in my name and used them to finance a wedding. "I gave you my credit score," I said. "You used it." Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. "You are just like your mother," she said. "Cold, calculating, convinced you are superior to everyone. Good night, Diane." I walked past her. She did not follow. Her heels remained planted on the stone floor behind me, clicking once, twice, then going still. I called Grace from the parking lot. The gravel shifted beneath my shoes. The music was muffled out here, only the deep resonance of bass and the faint silhouette of a saxophone drifting through the air. The night smelled of cut grass and lake water. "They've doubled down," I said. "Tell me." I recounted the evening, the letter, Diane in the hallway, Leah demanding to know why I remained, Richard standing at table 19 holding nothing. Grace listened without interruption. "The Attorney General inquiry letter was dispatched Friday," she said when I had finished. "Your father should receive it Monday at his office. Standard delivery. Monday 2 days from now." My father would settle into his desk chair, open an envelope from the state attorney general, and learn that his company was under preliminary investigation for trust suppression and identity theft. "He delivered a letter to me tonight," I said. "I would like to return the gesture on Monday." "Already prepared," Grace said. "Trust transfer notice and demand for full credit remediation, damages claim included. I simply need your confirmation. Shall I send it to his office or his home?" "Both." She paused. "Both means Diane will see it as well. Diane forged the executive documents. She deserves to witness what follows." Grace did not argue. I will dispatch both Monday morning first thing. Thank you, Grace. Myra. Her voice softened. Your mother would be proud. I ended the call. Stood in the parking lot for a full minute. The music inside swelled. The band was performing their final set. Applause filtered through the walls of the tent, muffled and warm. I returned inside, found the dance floor, located Nathan's uncle, and danced one final song. Some people spend their entire lives waiting for the moment someone who wronged them is finally confronted by the truth. Sometimes the truth arrives in an envelope. If this story is making your pulse quicken right now, you are not alone. Stay with me. Monday, 9:14 in the morning. I know the precise time because Grace had tracking numbers on both deliveries and texted me the moment they were confirmed. I was at my own office in Charlotte. Third cup of coffee. Reviewing steel specifications for a hospital expansion in Gastonia. My phone vibrated twice. Grace. Both delivered, office and home. I set the phone down, lifted my coffee, and returned to the specifications. In my father's office, a corner suite on the 4th floor of a building my mother had designed, 2 envelopes rested on his desk. His assistant had placed them there at 8:55 alongside the remainder of his morning correspondence. She would later tell Nathan she had noticed his hands when he opened the first one. Envelope 1. State Attorney General. Preliminary Inquiry Letter. Request for financial records pertaining to Pullman Development Corporation. Subject. Alleged trust suppression, identity theft, and breach of fiduciary duty. Envelope 2. Grace Wong, Attorney at Law, on behalf of Myra C. Pullman. Trust Activation Notice. Formal demand for transfer of 40% ownership of Pullman Development Corporation per the Testamentary Trust of Carroll and Pullman, filed 2006. Demand for full credit remediation. Demand for restitution. $47,000 in documented damages connected to unauthorized home equity lines of credit. My father read both. His assistant reported that his hands trembled. Not with anger, with something more elemental than anger. The particular trembling that overtakes a person when 19 years of meticulous construction begins to shift beneath its own weight. He called Diane first. We have a problem. He called his attorney second. He did not call me. 2 envelopes. He delivered one to me on Saturday. I returned 2 to him on Monday. I completed the hospital specifications by noon. Ate a sandwich at my desk. The steel order required revisions. I made the revisions. The day continued. He called at 4:17 in the afternoon. I was driving home from a site visit. His name appeared on my screen and I pulled into a gas station parking lot before answering, not because I was unsettled, but because I wanted to be completely still. What the hell is this? He said. No greeting, no preamble. You are going to destroy this family over money. I switched off the engine. You opened home equity lines in my name when I was 16, Dad. Silence. You suppressed Mom's trust for 19 years. Silence. And you handed me a letter at a wedding telling me I am not family. His breathing was labored, uneven. The breathing of a man whose walls are fracturing and who possesses no blueprint for what comes next. Your mother, he began. My mother built that company and you erased her. That is not what happened. Carol and I were partners. I did what any surviving spouse would do. I maintained. You maintained control over her legacy, over her name, over her daughter's social security number. He went silent. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, lower, stripped entirely of its boardroom composure. If this becomes public, we lose everything. The company, the house, Leah's. You did not lose everything when I left at 18. You will find a way through. Myra, please. That was the moment. Not the letter at the wedding. Not Diane in the hallway. That single word, please, from a man who had spent 30 years never appealing to anyone for anything. A man who had signed a letter disowning his daughter 3 days prior was now saying please. I want to be transparent about something. I did not savor it. It did not taste like triumph. It tasted like metal. Speak with your attorney, Dad. Mine is prepared. I ended the call, started the engine, and drove home. Diane called 20 minutes later. She must have taken the phone from Richard. Myra, please. Same word, different voice. Hers was saturated with tears. the kind that arrive rapidly and loudly when a performance demands urgency. I have nowhere to go if this company fails. Your father and we constructed this life together. Leah has just been married. Think about your sister. I pulled into my apartment parking garage and switched off the engine once more. Diane, you forged the executive documents. That was your father's decision. You opened credit cards in my name. You used them to fund a wedding. You charged a $14,000 dress to a card linked to a fraudulent home equity line. The weeping ceased instantly, like someone had closed a valve. Your mother left because she was selfish, Diane said. The warmth had evaporated from her voice, replaced by something cold and cornered. She placed her work before her family. She was so consumed with her drawings and her buildings that she neglected her husband. Just like you, cold, calculating, convinced you are superior, my mother did not leave Diane. She died. Silence. She died of pancreatic cancer at 41 in a hospital bed, requesting her sketch pad while her husband confirmed client dinners. She did not leave. You simply told everyone she had. Diane produced a sound I had never heard from her before. Not weeping, not rage. Something suspended between a gasp and a groan. The sound of a constructed narrative collapsing beneath its own accumulated weight. My mother established a trust because she understood precisely who she had married, I said. Goodbye, Diane. I ended the call and sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes. The concrete was cold. The fluorescent lights hummed steadily overhead. Then I went upstairs and made dinner. Leah called 3 days later, Thursday evening. Her voice was subdued, not the voice she had employed at the wedding. Polished, coached, assured. This was the voice of someone whose interior landscape had been silently rearranged, and who kept colliding with things she had not expected to find there. Nathan told me certain things, she said. About the credit cards. About a trust. I was seated on my sofa. The television was dark. The cedar box rested on the coffee table before me. Is it true? She asked. Did Dad really? Did he take out loans in your name? Yes. And Mom left you something? A trust with shares in the company. Yes. Why did nobody ever tell me? I closed my eyes. 29 years of careful indoctrination. 29 years of being told I had abandoned the family. 29 years of accepting the story because the story was comfortable and the truth was not. Would you have believed me? I said. The pause stretched long. I counted to 6 before she responded. I do not know, she said. That was honest, and I respected it. Another pause. I could hear Nathan somewhere in the background, a murmur too low to decipher, steadying her from the adjacent room without intruding. What happens now? Leah asked. The courts decide. There is an investigation underway. There will be a settlement or there will be a trial. Your father's attorney will guide him. And us. I thought about the 12-year-old who had asked why I was never in the family photographs. The 10-year-old who had been told I chose to leave. The 29-year-old who had stood in a gown purchased with stolen credit. Leah, I never intended to cause you harm. I wanted what Mom left for me. That is all. She exhaled, something adjacent to a sob, then steadied. Okay, she said. Okay. We ended the call. I did not contact her again. She did not contact me, but neither of us removed the other's number. That was something. The settlement arrived 6 weeks later. The Attorney General's investigation uncovered sufficient evidence for civil action, trust suppression, breach of fiduciary duty, identity theft. Richard's attorney reviewed the case and calculated the consequences. A trial would be public. The filings would be searchable. The clients who had trusted Pullman Development for 20 years would encounter accounts of forged documents and stolen Social Security numbers over their morning papers. Richard's attorney recommended settlement. Grace concurred. It was the correct decision. The terms were unambiguous. First, full transfer of 40% ownership of Pullman Development Corporation to Myra Carol Pullman, per the testamentary trust of Carol and Pullman established in 2006. Second, credit remediation. Both home equity lines of credit closed, all associated debt expunged from my credit record, $47,000 in documented damages remitted within 90 days. Third, Carol Pullman's name reinstated as co-founder on all corporate documentation, the company website, and the lobby plaque at the main office, effective within 30 days. Richard signed on a Tuesday. Diane signed alongside him. Their attorney's office occupied a glass tower in uptown Charlotte. Grace informed me afterward that Richard's hand had been steady at the signing, that he had resembled a man quietly accepting a diagnosis. I was not present. I was reviewing structural drawings for a mixed-use development in Durham, but I checked the company website that evening. There it was, updated that afternoon. The About page, second paragraph. Pullman Development Corporation was founded in 1998 by Carol and Richard Pullman. I stared at the screen. Her name rendered in the same font as his, within the same sentence as his. 20 years after they had removed it. I captured a screenshot and forwarded it to Grace. There she is. Grace replied with a single period. Just that. She understood. Richard stepped down as CEO within the month. The company characterized it as a semi-retirement. The press release cited a desire to redirect focus toward personal endeavors. No one questioned it publicly, though Nathan informed me that the senior partners had been apprised of the investigation, and the atmosphere in the office had grown noticeably cold. Diane did not reach out to me. I had not anticipated that she would. Some doors close with a letter. Others close with a signature on a settlement document. Hers closed with both. Leah sent me a text on the 1st of every month. How are you? Identical message each time. I replied each time. Good, you? We were not reconciled. We were corresponding. There is a distinction, and it was sufficient. Nathan forwarded me a photograph in August. Leah seated cross-legged on the floor of their living room, surrounded by weathered design journals retrieved from the attic. My mother's handwriting covering every page. Sketches of buildings that had been realized. Sketches of buildings that never were. Notes on materials. Notes on light. She is beginning to understand, Nathan wrote. I studied the photograph for a long time. My half-sister reading my mother's journals, gradually discovering a woman she had been conditioned to believe was inconsequential. Pullman Development continued. Smaller, quieter. The company still constructed things. Richard still held 60%. But the buildings no longer carried the same gravity when the name on the door included someone he had labored to erase. I voted my shares by proxy. I did not attend board meetings. I did not visit the offices. I had my own structures to design, my own steel to specify, my own blueprints to study at 2 in the morning. The 40% was never about authority. It was about correction. Some corrections require 19 years. Some require 6 weeks. Some require both. I placed the cedar box on my desk. New office, larger firm, a corner position with a window overlooking a construction site where a community health center was rising. My project, from foundation to roof. The box sat between my engineering license and a framed blueprint of my first independent build, a commercial kitchen for a nonprofit culinary program in West Charlotte. Both earned. Both mine. I opened the lid one final time. Cedar and lavender. 19 years and the fragrance had not diminished. I read the front of the letter. Myra, everything I built so you would never have to beg. I turned it over. Ask for the trust. I photographed both sides, printed them, placed them in a simple black frame, and set them beside the box. The wood had deepened in color since my mother had positioned it on that shelf. The brass hinges carried a faint green tint at their edges, but the fit remained precise. The lid still closed with a clean, quiet click. My mother had constructed things that endured. Buildings that withstood storms. A company that outlived her marriage. A trust that survived 19 years of deliberate suppression. And a cedar box that still carried the scent of her closet on a Tuesday afternoon in September, in a corner office her daughter had earned entirely on her own terms. I closed the lid. I did not need to open it again, but I knew exactly where it was. And that was the entire point. My father handed me a letter designed to erase me. But you cannot erase someone who already understands precisely who she is. My mother imparted that truth, not through speeches or declarations, but through a few words inscribed on the back of a letter I carried for 19 years. The people who endeavor to diminish you are invariably the ones who recognize that you cannot be diminished. Trust yourself. The paperwork will follow. That is my story. One letter at a wedding. One cedar box. and 19 years of unwavering patience. If you have ever had to reclaim something your family deliberately concealed from you, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.